My intention this morning is to run this as if it were a class and you're the students. I'll be the professor. And that'll give you some idea of what I'm trying to get across here. I believe that I'm IBL light. I have seen so many nice talks. I feel that I'm coming to the London Symphony carrying a kazoo. But that said, first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to pass around an attendance sheet. I do that in class, so might as well do it here. My intention is actually to cover a mistake. I did not pack something that I would like to hand out. And if I have your names, I can email it to you. So we'll start that way. Second thing, normally I start a class by asking, has anybody done the homework? So I wrote a problem on the board since I couldn't assign anything to you. Immediately, I can just see me emailing the entire conference. So here we have g of 0 is 0, and inductively g of n plus 1 is n plus 1 to the g of n power. And mathematicians being what they are, you've probably already solved it. Has anybody solved the problem? Okay, I see a couple of people. Would you all come up here and stand by the board? Because that's what I would do with students. You're students, therefore, and this is participation, right? Now, I saw more than one hand. I can count. Now, don't get started yet. Don't get started. No, he's escaping. Attempted escape. Now, those of you who did not raise your hands and feel so motivated, kindly come up and surround these people. Come on, come on, come on, come on. It's the first day, let's go. If they move real slowly, I may fill this 40 minutes just with this right now. Okay. So, the people who raised their hands as having solved the problem, let's see, that would be you and you. You're workers. You would normally get a working ticket. If you'd go ahead and solve the problem on the board, you have talked to one another, right? We exchanged. Boy, I hope they get the answer I got,
What do you want us to say? Talking right now? Or just
if you wish. If you got something to say, by golly, yeah. I was hearing nice chatter up there.
So it looks like both Dan and I started off by writing down what g of 0 was, and then we just went to the next one, which would be g of 1, and rewrote 1 as 0 plus 1. So that m is 0 in this case. So then you get g of 0 up here, which we know is 0. So then you get 1 to the 0, which is 1. And then we just continued that process. So g of 2.
I'll narrate here. Kevin is going to, I think he's probably going to write 2 as 1 plus 1, okay? So in this case, we're saying that m is equal to 1, so we should be raising to the g of 1 power. We've already found that g of 1 is 1, so I think what we get is 2 to the 1, which is 2. All right. G of 3, similarly, should be 2 plus 1. 3 is 2 plus 1. Okay, so we're taking 2 plus 1, we're going to raise it to the g of 2. G of 2 was 2. So we find 9, and this is where it gets a little bit harder. Okay. 4 is 3 plus 1. 3. 4 to the 9.
Which I did not do. I just left it.
You can tell me if I'm right, if this is 262,144, I think.
144.
Well, I think so. I don't know. Somebody can tell us if this is correct.
I'll tell you, it's right.
Excellent.
Now,
Thank you.
we don't normally, but now, those of you watchers, you're the watchers. Do you have any questions of these? My students do not normally present as these gentlemen did. Any questions,
I have
watchers?
2 questions. One, for what values of n is that equation correct? And 2, and perhaps it's my glasses, I wasn't convinced that that number between the parentheses and the exponent was the same, or variable was the same variable as in the other one, in which case it's an undefined problem.
I'm old and my handwriting is not so great.
Well, I'll go back to just the domain then.
I was thinking non-negative integers, but I actually, yeah, but
But you're right. It wasn't stated, but that was how I took the question.
yeah, good.
Yeah. I took the question as, or the question was about what domain this function had, and I took the question to mean that the domain was the non-negative integers. But it wasn't. You know.
That's how I took it. Oh, I don't need one of those. Any other questions? So, watchers, if you would, as I do in class, if you would normally just initial the green sheet here for your watching credit. This is, as I say, I get people to the board in groups. I try to get the rest of the class. I decided to let you guys have a pass. I would normally be out rounding you up, but this being what it is, I did not do that. So that there would be 1 full ticket for working at the board. There would be 20% of a ticket for watching at the board. The idea being that, did I have an idea? Yes. When I started this process, I was asking for volunteers. This is 18 years ago. I was asking for volunteers for a problem, and suddenly, in front of me, 3 or 4 hands went up. And I thought, nuts. I didn't think of this. So I wanted everybody, so I finally decided all of those people would go to the board and present me one solution. I didn't want to see 4 of them, or whatever number there was. I wanted to see just one. And that's how we started with this, and I've discovered, by blundering into it, that people discuss at the board. They don't normally present to the class. I don't ask my students to present to the class. But we at least start that way. So I've started with an attendance sheet, and I've started with some board work, and workers and watchers, and let's see if I can make this thing go. So breaking the silence. Students normally fear to talk, and I can tell you right now, I identify with them like you can't believe. It's kind of scary to stand up here. Last year I gave the first part of this talk under I do and I understand by Confucius. I didn't get finished because I stopped in the middle for questions, and there were plenty. So that finished things out. Let's go ahead. So do students clam up? Absolutely. Let me bring my notes up here. So my topic is student participation, and I've had some success doing it. I've been doing it for a while, 18 years, since 1996, getting people to participate. In the participation part, I count student activity using tickets. I gave 2 up here. This green sheet for the watchers would be a large ticket. And I have some blue tickets for questions, and I hope you'll have some questions because otherwise I'll have to give you an assignment during this. So they get tickets for board work, speaking, and watching. And how often, well, I did this talk last year, so I used last year's data. I kept last year's data. How often did students talk in my classes? Last spring, a year ago this past spring, over 2,034 times by actual count. I counted the tickets, I gave 1 each time. If a student talked or asked a reasonable question more than once, they did not get an extra ticket. So 2,034 is a lower bound. Working at the board, I had 1,114 volunteers. Now, there weren't 1,114 problems, but you can see how this might work. Sometimes they were solo, sometimes they were in teams. They got the same reward for working in a team as for working solo. So these, there'd be 2 tickets here. If they'd worked singly, there'd be just 1. And then, for most of those 18 years, students would be sitting in the audience or in class. They'd be talking about who knows what, last night's TV show, next week's date, the football game. And a few years ago, I just had this inspiration to send them to the board. Stand up there and watch the mathematics being created by the other people. And there were 742 trips to go to the board. They got 20% credit. It's better than boredom. So in summary, then, putting all those numbers together, there were 3,890 bits of student activity in that one normal semester. Well, relatively normal. So how normal is it? So there's 5 previous semesters. The blue bars indicate oral activity. The red bars indicate workers at the board. And the green bars indicate the watchers. The first green bar is somewhat artificially low because that was the semester that partway through, I just got annoyed and said, go up to the board. So it wasn't a full semester of those. And the one that I've reported is the one in the middle that peaks. But you can see the others are at least ballparking the same. And for 18 years, I've kind of blundered forward doing this, kind of solving a problem as it came up. The other terms are up there. If I take this to activities per student, then the tallest blue bar is 30 speakings per student this past fall. Things have fallen down a little bit. And if you adjust for student contact hours, then we have that. It's nice to have a rising trend, but you can't expect that in data. Things go up and down. 3-bar charts is enough. We'll have a pie chart over the 5 semesters. There's the student contact hours. Most Calc 1 and Calc 2 looks like they take up about 2/3 of the contact hours. Trig, college algebra, and applied calculus then take up the others. So why give watching credit? This is the best of cartoons I could have ever found. It just explains so well, although usually there wouldn't be a professor at the front of the board, there would be other students, and normally I've been getting them up. Why give watching credit? Because they can ask, they can discuss, they can join a team, the roles can switch. A worker one day can be a watcher the next day. And here's what I think is what I think is a benefit. You students meet each other, they get some class ownership, they can bond as a group. And I do have classes that bond very well. On the other hand, how do you get it going? Why does it happen? I require it. It's part of the course. I'm asking them to do it. I said in the abstract, I said that the fear of public speaking is bigger than fear of death. I figure that only lasts until death really becomes an imminent idea. And students find it vexing at the beginning. I have left out at this point the percentages of how I count these activities, but I do mention that they are zero-sum games. You're probably familiar with a zero-sum game, but indulge me if you would. If you're grading your tests normally, and a student gets an 80 on a 100-point test, student gets the 80, what happens to the other 20 points? You could imagine they're all in my closet or something like that. But in a zero-sum game, if a student got 80% of the participation points, the other 20% would be spread among the class. So that I don't take any of those back, because I think it's scary and it's a bit of an inducement to get the students to actually talk. Some mild persuasion may be needed. I hope you can read our caveman telling people how to rub sticks together. And what I'm going to do now is examine the term starting at the back and moving toward the early weeks of the term. So in anti-chronological, we'll start out with weeks 3 through 15 when things are going smoothly, and the daily routine. Questions first, get volunteers. Teamwork would seem natural to them by now. Team members each get 100% credit, just as if they were solo. We get non-watchers to become volunteers. And to put it in a little more detail, get a list of the homework problems first. They supply that. I start at the harder problems and work toward the easier ones, asking for volunteers for each. More than one volunteers for a problem. They work as a team. They're used to that. Sometimes they will switch if nobody volunteers. Sometimes a team member will switch from one problem to another. Everybody gets 100% credit, and get the non-volunteers to be observers or watchers. After the solutions are written, again, I don't ask them to present. Maybe I should. I said this is IBL light. I work on going over the problem, so maybe I should go over the problem here. G of 0 is 0. Given G of 1 then is 1 to the 0, which is 1. I would not have expected this much detail out of a class. G of 2 is 2 to the 1. G of 3 is 3 to the 2nd. And G of 4 then is 4 to the 9th. I would normally then ask for questions. Any questions on the problem? Okay. So at this point, solutions are written. You guys are all seated down. Questions, answers, comments. Everybody gets credit for participating in the class orally. So there'd be some reward for speaking up. Any questions now? I've appealed to your small sense of greed. Yes, good. Oh, wait.
Is it possible for people to just get enough credit to pass only observing, by only being watchers?
I don't know the answer to that question. I certainly have people, well, let's see, all right, did you say pass?
Well, I don't know how it's factored
I
into your
flunked,
final
but I've
grade.
ended up flunking very few people in most of the courses, though I can certainly drive out bunches. Trig had a massive egress this past term, but usually, since there's other things to be graded, tests and that kind of stuff. Attendance, by the way, counts something. Absences, detract. So yeah, there can be people who basically just observe, but they're probably not going to come out with an A in the course.
Okay, thanks.
Mike Pugliese, Arvada West High School. You said that for incorrect solutions that you provide a correct solution, go through it. Do you ever let the students do that?
Generally, I don't. I haven't asked them to do that. I'm trying to, when I started this whole process and I've become comfortable with it, I like this, therefore I'm not going to improve it much. The way that I got them to participate was to guarantee that I wouldn't humiliate them. I'd never ask, who did this? Or, I'd tell them, hey, if the problem's wrong, deny you had anything to do with it. Be a politician. I had nothing to do with that. So sometimes they will. After a while, they get comfortable enough to feel like they're at home. It's not that common, but sometimes they will do it.
I remembered my real question.
Good.
Where's the slide about the redistribution?
The redistribution. Well, I'm going to keep
The
going.
zero-sum game. Yeah, that's right. You didn't write it up. That was the thing, the zero-sum game.
No.
So in principle, couldn't no student ever work or observe or speak, and then all 100% of that would be redistributed amongst everybody, and everybody would get full participation?
Theoretically, yes.
But they aren't smart enough to collude, or
Well,
they actually want to learn, which is good. I'm just curious because I've had experiences where people have actively decided to go slower, particularly in more method classes, where it's kind of like, oh, well, I guess we only made it through one problem today, oh, well, and then mysterious, so I mean, that to me would be a concern sometimes, and I'm curious if that ever becomes a problem for you. No.
Nope. It's they're students. We love our students, right? But yet I can still say prisoner's dilemma. Do they trust each other to actually go through with this? Because if only one student spoke during the entire term, that student would be so points wealthy that it would be just outstanding. And as a matter of fact, I'll say something about that a little later. So let's see. So everybody would oh, wait a minute. I've been so terribly out of sorts here. I lose track. Would you, let's see, hand one back to him. And wait a minute. Actually hand, I guess this is why, see, it was one that's supposed to go down there as well. Wait a minute, didn't you, you didn't? I'm sorry. See, this is why, now you owe me one. Or you can hot potato. Where was I? Oh, yeah, so let's see. So every comment question gets a ticket. And this is a separate zero. So these are two separate zero-sum games. I will sometimes ask, do you have a ticket yet? So I kind of asked you, do you have have you spoken yet? So how do you begin the semester? How do we get started with this? Back to the weeks 1 and 2. So there won't be any watchers. Oh, 5 minutes left? Oh my goodness, there won't be any watchers. 5 minutes left? Okay, so there won't be any watchers. Get one thing on the established at a time. So On day one, I give credit for nearly anything, including, can we stop and dismiss? Can I have a ticket? What? Wait, what? Who said that? Pass this back to that gentleman if you would. Now that's the first day. How many tickets do I need for an A? Well, that depends on how many of the rest of you actually participate. After the first day's homework, to get them up to the board first time, it's a grand opening special, 2 for the price of 1. Hey, it's this kind of stuff that works, folks. And how do you score the zero-sum games? So I use the square root. I count student J's tickets, take the square root, add all the classes' square roots, and then use the points pool and take the square J's root and divide it by the sum. This says it mathier. Points for J is the sum of the tickets, then square rooted. Points then is the points pool times the square root divided by the sum of the square roots. The square root controls runaways. Somebody who would Gabby themselves into an A can't quite do it when you're square rooting. The number of students times the course points for a board or oral times the percentage of course days completed. And the points pool increases day by day, so that's how you would figure it on a certain day. If you haven't tried any of this stuff, stick your neck out. Give it a shot. I think what I did is kind of IBL light. There's no free lunch. It takes up time. Students don't like that. Any further questions?
Amanda Matson, Clark University. When do you take the tickets back? Like, is it at the end of the hour they given to you?
At the end of the hour, you would have a name on your ticket and a date. So in case I spill the darn things, I can put them back in order. And the class, just in case I don't recognize the name. So at the end of the day, you'd hand them back. Anything else? So the question that I was going to ask you, if I had had that kind of time, was to ask you to state the weights. Here's what I do. Then 1 hour test for that much, final, so let's see, what is that? 60% for test, 20% for final, 10% for attendance, 5% for board and oral. I teach calculus and lower generally. And allow yourselves the possibility of failure, which shouldn't be big news. I thought it was going to be big news until I heard all the other lectures earlier. Rewards require risks. IBL will feel risky for you and the students, but better to do something even if it's not perfect. Thank you for your patience and kind attention. So you can keep the tickets, and if you just kind of like to see what a ticket is like, feel free to grab one on your way out. I got a zillion cartoons I put on one side of the pieces of paper.
I think we have time for one more question, if anyone has one more question.
An earned ticket. Wait. Pass this back. People in front get a lot of elbow or a lot of shoulder action.
This is
No, I
Nathan
don't.
Clements from the University of Wyoming. Would you be willing to send us your large database of comics?
Yeah, there's copyright issues. I was careful to put copyrights on the slides. I'd consider doing that if you'd, email me something and promise me that you're not going to do something that's going to violate the copyright. After all, these people created the stuff. That's their bread and butter.